I- The big best time for a meeting, huh? Day after the federal fund.
Yesterday was, oof.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you gotta try to laugh.
Right?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for making time to making it to the Pathway to End Gun Violence Advisory Council. Welcome to our guests, council staff, our clerks, our law department. Thank you. We're ready to take roll call.
Chairperson Sanchez,
Present.
Co-Chair Corey Jones,
Present.
Co-Chair Diana Garlington is absent. 50-year-old Monacaran. Detective David Perez.
Yep.
Michael Stevens is absent. Rob is absent.
He's actually walking in. I just seen him looking for parking. So
Okay.
any minute.
James Montero is absent. Lisa Wong. Absent, so as of right now, we have 8 present, 5 absent, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, so that was item number one. Item number two is the first topic on here is CVI research and funding. Is this you, Corey? I think PJ
We
was.
might all have something to add. I mean,
Right.
so federally, I mean, at the state level regarding DOT dollars, we were worried that we could see some cuts. We were level fund and we have a little bit of extra money due to the Road to Prosperity program. So if that goes through, hopefully we can have some of our funds this calendar year be focused in this work. At the federal level, I think Mike might have more. I know it's a day after the federal fund situation, but do you have any idea what's gonna happen with the CVI grants and?
So Corey, just and just, I know we all probably know what we're talking about, but can you explain what happened yesterday that?
Yeah, so yesterday, there was the budget office at the federal level did quote unquote pause. I don't know how that's necessarily defined across all federal funds. Due to an executive order that Trump put out that specifically said that like DEI, woke, pro LGBT funds need to be revoked or something of that matter. The issue is that there's an extraordinary amount of uncertainty about how exactly that is applied and what exactly is the line of kind of reconciliation, if there is one. Historically, grants will get pulled one by one and there will be, years of delineation and then the grants will be sent out. But in this administration, there's no, historically doesn't matter, I guess, sometimes. That's my.
Do you have anything?
Yeah, I was, the last time they were in office, they came after Department of Justice grants or some of them specifically. And it was done through the agreements that the states ultimately signed. So it's like when you get the contract, it comes with all these conditions and some of them had to do with restrictions on communication between law enforcement and federal law enforcement related to immigration. A lot of the reporting is accurate. The state has some federal court rulings that state how long people are held and all of that stuff. So Department of Corrections, most local police departments do not hold. Folks go to the Department of Corrections intake and it's really the state. This is unprecedented to go after everything. I mean, this affects everything, school, we saw SNAP, Medicaid, everything. This is everything. So they're specifically citing like language, like you mentioned, they want DEI pulled out, anything about Green New Deal, any of that stuff, woke Marxist ideology, gender stuff. There's the whole litany of stuff that you heard during, if you pay attention, that's been out there. So, again, some of the grants mandate that the funding go to those things.
Yeah.
So it's unprecedented in that they're going after grants that are already made. That's the
Mhm.
issue, is they're not the ones that are coming. So we really don't know the impact tomorrow too. And as much of this about anything seems about trimming the federal government in general. They're hoping for hundreds of thousands of resignations on the return to work and the buyout and all of this. So it's all part of a larger scope. So at the bigger picture, it's just hard to say what happens. So most of the grants that pass through our office are statutory by formula. And they've been around for decades. It's the competitive ones, CVI, I'm concerned about, obviously, anything for transitional housing for or LGBTQ and all that stuff. Some of our agencies are gonna be highly impacted. The technical way they went after us last time, we did not meet the definition of sanctuary at the time, even though we sort of were going along with that. This time, I think it's a different definition. So I just don't know. It's a big question mark of what if they're gonna scoop what we have already. I expect a lot more injunctions than just this one to Monday, so.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people have asked me like, how is this legal? But while it's not legal, the administrative branch, the executive branch does control the budget office. Right? So it's like we really are at a time where we're gonna be seeing the testing of our separation of branches.
The cases that we got into back in 2018 went all the way to the Supreme Court, rid of all of the things, right? I went through all of the way up and but the election changed and the new administration withdrew all of it. And so it was never actually resolved,
Yeah.
so.
So I know there was, I don't know if anybody's seen it, but last night, a federal judge blocked
Yeah.
Yep, till Monday, yeah.
till Monday. There's also, I have a document from the executive office that kind of explains, I don't know if people seen it, I can share it with folks, but kind of in detail, small detail explains what's not frozen or what wouldn't have been frozen. And just other things that are on the horizon, so I can share that down.
Just one second. Can you just reflect the numbers that have joined us?
So noted.
Thank you.
Which is even challenging about that though, because like Mike was kind of saying, like, there's some programs where it's the solicitation included those things, and then there's some programs where maybe the execution or supportive services, right, went in that direction. And so at DOT at least, we're like, we don't know what the scope is, right? So like, is it just the federal funds, that had that solicitation that we should be concerned about, or is it everything? Because every way we kind of carry out this work is from like an equity lens, right?
From my understanding, it's federal dollars.
Yeah.
So I have somebody I know who works for the DOJ who potentially will lose his job because he was hired under DEI, right? So it's anything that had any of that language in it. And I think part of the pause was to evaluate those grants or that funding stream that was going out with any DEI language in it.
Anyone else have anything they want to share or discuss on this topic? I know a lot of us work for nonprofits around this work and just in other nonprofit work that, there's a lot of uncertainty, so we try to.
Not federal funding or state funding, but the city just listed its RFP for summer workforce development, so we'll send out an email blast to all the community organizations this week, but definitely in a way to sort of bring in CBI into workforce development.
Probably doesn't need to be said, but going forward with this administration, leave all of that language out of any grant funding. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
We've kind of gone through with the thesaurus. And
Right.
where it's,
Synonyms.
diversity becomes kind of whole community, inclusive is whole community.
Right.
And equity is access, and yeah, so it's a thesaurus to. Without changing much of the other bones of stuff, it's just
Yeah.
tweaking some of the language because it's gonna be filters that are looking for that anyway. They're just tweaking their filters that are already looking at these applications to now, so so some things I haven't submitted yet that we're able to tweak before it goes in.
Right.
The crisis intervention grant we're working on, which could be a target, so it's tough to say.
And some organizations have that in their either vision or mission.
Yep.
Statement.
Yep.
Which potentially may cause.
Yeah, I probably have to change all our policies. Like when we also, I don't know if folks were watching the continuing resolution that Congress passed, there was an original continuing resolution. Basically, the continuing resolution is like a bill that like continues the spending for, federal dollars without necessarily reauthorizing all the individual programs. And Elon made a tweet and the continuing resolution got pulled and we got a skinny bill that was like, went from like thousands of pages to hundreds. And so there's a lot of federal programs that are already in, a level of uncertainty because they haven't been reauthorized by Congress. And so one of those programs is our federal WIOA program, which is the Federal Workforce Program. We're anticipating it will be reauthorized because it's been an extremely bipartisan piece of legislation, but quite literally everything, is on the table to be nixed in this administration. And, it's really it was an unprecedented process that no one in my office ever seen. And WIOA has been around since the New Deal.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
I apologize. So, working with the, partners that I'm working with now at, United Way, as the program officer, we've definitely been, just speaking to them and letting them know that they can pivot away from the word equity.
Yeah.
But in their mission, it's still doing the work,
Right.
of equity. So, that's how we've been addressing it.
Love that.
The last thing I have on this, so PJ couldn't make it because he's dealing with a lot of this stuff at the AG's office. He did want us to be aware that the AG held a virtual press conference on this topic yesterday. That's recorded and has a lot of resources. And that the AG joined, I think, about 20 other attorney generals from across the nation to file a block or some motion here in Rhode Island, actually. This morning, so there's a lot of ongoing work that we all gotta stay on top of.
Yeah, I think it also like emphasizes the importance of going after more state revenue because we can't necessarily rely on the fund for the next 4 years. One thing I've been talking to legislators about, and folks are interested, but they're just concerned if there's the capacity to make it happen this legislative season, is doing a tax like Gina Raimondo suggested in 2019, I believe, that would be on guns and ammunition, and then we could have those funds, guns, ammunition, shooting ranges, have those funds kicked back to CBI work to try to create a sustainable revenue of funding for this work.
So there is an example of it. One of my coworkers on my team actually helped California pass the gun ammo tax, AB 28. So there's examples of that actually happening. Also, fresh news, the White House has rescind freeze on federal grants. So there won't be any freeze.
That's good.
Doesn't mean it won't be one future.
Yeah.
After this drives up.
I think that's like the biggest thing is like, I think like, ultimately my personal sense was like, this is gonna get tied up in courts if anything. But at least this is like showing like, this administration is not putting anything off the table in terms of how aggressive they're willing to take their priorities and agendas. So like you said, definitely good to plan ahead and other sustainable funds and streams. What's that CBI research and funding? So moving to the next bullet point under item number 2 is mentorship program and outreach. So from my understanding, there's been quite a bit of conversations in this group and elsewhere regarding mentorship programs. I think this group specifically has spoken about trying to support or do something around Candy Plaza school dismissal time. You want to add more to it, Corey? I think this was.
Yeah, I was gonna say I had attended, I think it was like a LISC CBI webinar one about the safe passage model. I didn't even realize that what we were talking about is the CBI, model that is done around the country. And basically they're just saying that you know, you could do it with a CBO, but also there's been organizations that have done it completely volunteer based, and it's been extremely successful because, you know, that's a huge hotspot for violence with young people is going to school and from school. So, you know, my thing is that I think if we can do it with a CBO, that would be the best outcome. But if that is impossible due to the, you know, federal constraints, that every CBO is gonna be facing and potential layoffs, that, you know, when the school board is sworn in, you know, potentially if the board is willing, I would be, pushing for us to take on a voluntary capacity to make that happen if necessary. So yeah, I think that, you know, again, with the federal situation, like, it's gonna take a lot more community and rolling our sleeves up, because no one's coming to save us, so we gotta save ourselves.
I would say, at least obviously from the test is, when the institute is at its kind of full capacity, that was kind of the role of the street workers, right? So like we would disperse street workers in areas we knew was hotspot areas for violence after school. Central High School was one of them just because of all those schools. Kennedy Plaza, we knew because it was the hub where schools came. Those were kind of the two areas, unless we heard anything different from like middle schools.
Yeah.
Right, there were certain middle schools we knew there was just a lot of violence, so anything we heard, we would try to be in those areas, but the two main areas was Central, because even somehow Mount Pleasant kids ended up at Central, right, all the high schools would end up at Central. And then if it wasn't Central, it was Kennedy Plaza, so that was just when the institute was at capacity to do so.
Yeah, so and maybe, you know, the California bill, it was like it was like the Violence Reduction and School Safety Act. And, you know, I know that that was pivotal in their messaging to get it passed. And maybe even, you know, the play is to roll our sleeves up, do the work, and, you know, tell legislators we need this work funded because this isn't sustainable. But this needs to happen.
Alright, so what you're proposing is that if there is no CBO, that like, how do you see the school board like help with taking this on?
So, I think just having folks that are willing to volunteer some coordination time, kind of like Miguel did with the shelter, but with extremely less risk, you know, or liability, right? You know, you have some folks that are kind of leading in coordination. You have someone at the top that's obviously like has that expertise, kind of like Better Lives, right? So that would be someone like the Nonviolence Institute. And then we really just have like a team of volunteers that we would shift out to different times. And yeah, and I think again, like passing resolutions and advocating that like this needs to be funded sustainably. Obviously, we can't cover every shift. Obviously, you know, we can't do it every time, but just showing that like this is that important that, you know, school board members, community members are all willing to come out here and make it known that this needs to be a full-time position.
If I could say something, and Lisa, you could probably speak to this. So I was just watching a documentary on the Guardian Angels, and that is an amazing documentary that everyone should watch. And basically, I didn't know at
What's
this
it
time
called?
that. I'm sorry,
Guardian
Guardian
Angels.
Angels. Curtis Silver, I believe, was the founder of that particular organization.
This
But
was
I'm sorry.
80s, right?
This is the 80s,
80s,
correct,
yeah.
right. But they showed data, and I mentioned data on this group, that it actually worked because there was so much buy-in from volunteers, teenagers, mothers, fathers, different organizations, so forth and so on. So I think that again, let me circle back. That was one of my reasons for joining this group or being appointed to this group from the mayor, is that my main thing is action steps, right? So
Yeah.
like we're doing amazing things here, great conversations, you know, multiple people here have a community background and I've done amazing work, but I'm looking for action steps. I want to be out there as I used to be probably, you know, when I was much younger, 7, 8 years ago. But nevertheless, I feel that the community needs to see folks per se, right? In those communities, knocking on doors, having conversations. And then from a data perspective, you get so much personal data that you really can't get from numbers and statistics when you're doing that work. So I think that's a suggestion that I would like to put forward for us as a board per se to kind of take these steps as well.
I love it.
If I can add, Alan, I completely agree. I'll be honest with you, and I don't believe there's any coincidences. Just last night, I was thinking about the Guardian Angels because I was a little girl. I lived on Reynolds Avenue. I remember them marching down the street with their beret and their combat boots, and I was like, "Who are these guys, right? And that's what it was. They were volunteers. They actually came from New York to visit Providence. And actually, when I was familiarized many years ago with the Nonviolence Institute, when outreach first started, that's what I thought of. I was like, oh, this is almost the same as the Guardian Angels, except it's a paid position. I think now in our times now, there's just some differences. One, I think about our community. I think about the volunteering and the buy-in, right? I think there are people that want to, but then there is the fear of safety. Because now we have so many more guns, on our streets. And we also know that a lot of young people are carrying them, you know? So when I think of that model, I think it's great. We got to get the right people, but then we also have to get the right training.
Yeah.
You know, so we have to ensure that everyone that's willing and committed to this mission really has the right training and has the resources that they need. You know what I mean? So are we given walkie-talkies? Are we, you know what I mean? Like there has to be some safety put in place, you know what I mean? So that people feel comfortable enough to be out.
I agree with you saying 100%. And that's another reason why law enforcement has to buy in. So
Right.
one of the reasons why the Guardian Angels didn't last, I think they did amazing work, but it didn't last is because of that conflict of law enforcement. And they felt like, oh, they're, you know, they're not trained or they're taking away from, you know, what we're supposed to do. per
So
se.
the same with the
Correct.
dynamics
Yes.
before we built our relationship was the
Yes.
same dynamics with the
Yes.
street workers,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? So it's something that has to be built and there has to be partnerships.
Mhm.
Well,
And
I think the difference would be, is that when the Guardian Angels, this is my assumption, like the
Mhm.
Guardian Angels started, which in all good intent, there was no conversation. Right, at
Right.
least this is, right, you're hearing
Yeah,
there's a conversation.
we're at the
being
same
had.
table.
So there'd be the understanding. I think also what's important is allowing it time. Right, it's not gonna, like, even if we all just, everybody in this room said, hey, we trained and we're gonna go out there. Tomorrow doesn't mean the violence is gonna stop. It doesn't mean next week or the month after, or there's never gonna be fights. There are gonna be
Mhm.
fights. It's just allowing time, right, to now then potentially see the data or the decrease. And if there is an increase, what do we need to change? What's the pivot to figure that out? I think sometimes when initiatives are started, the time is not given to it and we don't see any immediate results. And so it's just, let's get rid of that.
Mhm. And that's, and again, because we're here and this is a mayor appointed scenario, we also need to get the state involved. So the governor needs to be involved, the, you know, city council, the mayor, like everyone needs to be involved because at the end of the day, we're losing kids in the streets every day. You see it firsthand. One, you were a part of it firsthand and you're still seeing in your capacity now. So that's just very important to me. Every time I see something, Lisa, that you post, it just blows my mind. I'm just like, this is enough. And Diane, you and I have been colleagues for many times, in many scenarios addressing this violence in the streets. We've been in the streets, you know, hitting the pavement. So I just think it needs to be buy-in. That's the only way this is going to work, and it's the only way that it's going to, amongst other things. But I feel like a big part of this is going to be something that could actually decrease the violence.
Yeah.
The last thing I would like to add in regards to that is, I think there is a window of time, like, great idea, but I think that action needs to be put in place quickly. And why I say that is, you know, many of us in this room grew up with, community leaders and role models. We're losing our community leaders and role models.
Yes.
We're aging out.
Mhm.
We're not seeing a lot of the younger generation stepping into those roles. So I feel like it really would have to be, you know, should have happened many years ago,
Yes,
but
yes.
action needs to start to, you know, the
It's never
body.
too late. Right,
Yeah,
and it's never too late.
exactly.
So is this an idea that we wanna keep exploring? Cause I think, you know, it's great that we talk about it here. But if it's something that we wanna actually start doing, then I can ask my council staff to start working on the logistics and actually trying to build out a framework around this. Detective, do you have any thoughts on this? How's Kennedy Plaza
I
been lately?
do, it's been a little bit better, it's always, it follows like when school first starts, it's horrible. When school's getting towards the end, it gets bad. The winter is usually, we're safe because a lot of these kids they want to get on the bus quick. They don't want to be out. So the cold does help us, but I will say, and I don't speak for the department, but I'll say, me personally, if we're talking about putting boots on the ground, something similar to Guardian Angels, I think using something, doing it under a banner like the program, the Non-Violence Institute will make it a lot easier than bringing something new to the table. Doing it under a recognized banner, so to speak,
I agree.
would be easier than bringing something brand new out and being like, this is, whatever we decide to call it. It'll also make it easier for us because there's already been language and agreements and things worked out. So that's just my opinion. It'll be
Right, there is a
easier.
level of trust and there's a partnership already that.
It'll be
will be a
easier to
little easier.
do that way, I believe, than to just post something new out. Than to reinvent the wheel, so to speak.
I remember seeing a couple months ago, is Ripta paying for like 2 police officers at Kenny Plaza? Is that?
Yes.
That's still.
I don't know what the terms of that agreement are, because that's happens above my pay grade, but there was some kind of agreement in place, yes.
So yeah, I think reaching out to the folks at LYC too, probably.
Sure, we can reach out to them.
Do you know someone over there, Lisa?
I got a number.
You know, with that being said, it's great that police are in Kennedy Plaza, but that's why I think it's even more important to have a balance too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for those that are in KP to build a relationship with those community folks because if not, it's disaster waiting to happen. You know, we said
It was
this,
flooded for a while.
yeah, we said this, last year when one of the big incidents occurred, you know, there's 2 police officers and there's 300 kids.
Right.
You know, you think about the safety there.
Right.
You know, so,
Well, you put law enforcement in a predicament.
right,
where
that's, yeah,
Now they make the
exactly.
news and right now it's just controversial.
We saw the videos, you know
Right.
what I mean? So,
That predicament's not gonna change too much though if we put volunteers in that same situation. Like there's a lot of potential for things to go sideways, especially just because the youth right now don't respond to the OGs the way that they used to.
right,
Like,
and that's why it's very important to get the right people. It
Right.
can't be just people saying, hey,
Agreed.
I'll do it, I wanna do it, you know, there's a lot of great intentions, you know what I mean, but you can get someone a situation that they can get really hurt.
And I know we can get into the weeds, but like those volunteers of paid staff, whatever it may be, right? Their role down there isn't to physically break up.
Right.
fights.
Right, right.
For us to be present.
Because I think that's the message, right? That's when kids are like, you can't touch me.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
It becomes challenging, right?
Right,
They're now in your face.
Right.
The role is to kind of build establish
Mhm.
relationships while you're down there, being preventative as possible, right? Like that's talking to, but obviously the right people, the right training, because some people
Familiar
just don't feel
faces.
comfortable to approach a kid. And they disrespect me, then,
Right.
no, get like, so I think it's the messaging that's put forth that this, not volunteer, even if, like I said, if it was everybody, we're not down there to break up fights and throw people
Yeah.
around and kind of be bodyguards and bullies. We're down there to build relationships with folks in the community.
Would it make sense to maybe catch this on the front end? And not wait until the kids are on Kennedy Plaza? Maybe to get some of these volunteers and these OGs into the schools? I don't know if any of that is being done, but it sounds to me like building the relationship needs to happen away from Kennedy Plaza.
Right. So that way, when if they see him down there, I know who that is.
So
It's
that's,
gotta be built.
But I think it's,
They have that now.
The community
Right,
specialists.
in the
They,
schools or in the
um,
rec centers or something, I mean,
The schools
trying to
have the
capture
community
these kids.
specialists.
The schools have the it's an odd name, cultural.
but they're not
It's
doing
not-
anything
They
all
don't
around.
follow
not
them
right,
around,
it's
that's
not
what I was
right.
gonna say. They're in the schools, but they don't
It's-
follow them
yeah.
down. they don't follow them
I'm
to
just
Kennedy
thinking
Plaza.
maybe on a different concept than what they're doing now.
Yeah.
Obviously, it needs to be more aggressive. I mean, that's just my opinion. You gotta capture the kids before they're on Kennedy Plaza and develop relationships in the neighborhoods, in the schools. you know, in that kind of space.
I know that the city was working on that rotation again, because at one point, what happened was dismissal all started to be at the very same time,
Yeah.
so everyone was all going to the same place at the same time. And I know there was conversation about making sure there was some times in between the releases. I don't know if that has occurred.
I think they're still working on that.
I think they're still in the same time.
And if I could add another component that I've seen, in doing the work is that we need more women volunteers. Because
Absolutely.
you'd be amazed how, kids respond to men, fine, but you'd be amazed how they respond to women, right? And the motherly figure, so forth and so on. So I think that's something that really needs to be a part of this.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Definitely.
Anyone else have anything else on this topic?
Lisa, what do you think the Nonviolent Institute can and can't do in this capacity? Can they administer training, coordinate?
I will say, like, in today's day and age, I think it's important to try to get volunteers, but like, yo, like this economy, like,
Yeah.
people are strapped. Like, there's not a lot of people that have like free time.
Well, that
like-
was the conversation we had last time, right? Like, are we offering some type of stipend? Are we, you know what I mean? And I know it could be really, really costly. Would we get volunteers? We would, but not, I don't think that it's going to be
Sustainable.
sustainable.
Yeah, maybe a 2 weeks, 3
Right,
weeks,
right.
but maybe we could use that portion of the time to shed light. Right, and say, you know, obviously, we know this isn't sustainable, but we need, you know, this bill to pass so we can fund this, you know, long term, right?
But to answer your previous question, I mean, yeah, not obviously, but we could provide nonviolence training. We could provide, you know, some type of structure and, you know, scheduling and coordinating. But again, first and foremost would be to get the volunteers
Yeah,
and then, figure out how we move forward.
yeah.
Is this a subcommittee thing? So should
That's what I
there
was
be a
thinking.
subcommittee formed around this? Because I think you need to build some bones to this and
Mhm.
more than we can discuss here about how do you attract volunteers? When you attract them, how do you vet them? You know what I mean? How do you build those relationships with law enforcement being part of that committee, right? From the ground, like, let's build what's going to fit. Comms is a big thing, right? The communications, particularly when you spread all out, but now there are some apps and stuff that can facilitate
Yeah,
that are free, you know, and some other things that, you know, but I think it's still. And then ultimately put a price tag to it too. But you don't know what the price tag is until, so we're talking about maybe having partners out of the high schools directly or high schools and middle schools and stuff like that, you know, that starts to multiply.
And I think that's great. I think, you know, what Robert mentioned and what Mike's mentioning, right? I think also getting buy-in from the high schools, middle schools, the staff, right? So it could be a part of their job description. You know what I mean? These 3 people do it on this day or this week, and you know what I mean? So then you have those that are in the high schools, then you have staff at the Nonviolence Institute, and then you have, you know what I mean? It's like, it's not going to be one entity. I think it's
Right. I
gotta
was
be
thinking about that.
many.
We could, yeah, like especially the community specialists, right? Maybe we, you know, change their job description to, you know, have them do some type of rotation.
Community outreach,
Yeah.
something, yeah.
I think it seems like we're getting at how this has to be a multi-pronged approach, and maybe like for the next meeting, it's sort of thinking about what can we like do now? Maybe like in terms of advocacy, which is the next agenda item, and like communications, and then is there an opportunity to potentially work with the school district, especially like, you know, as we plan for when the schools do come back, and then what is the role of like the mayor's office, city council, school board in that, and then rec centers are obviously readily
Right.
accessible to us right now, like what can we sort of add into ongoing program that, rec centers, for example, to be more preventative than, you know, reactive or responding to that, so maybe like, that's the next phase is like identifying the various ways that we can sort of work on CBI,
Right.
and what can we do now, and what do we need funding for, what would, you know, be no cost to us right now, mapping that out.
I mean, in
Like
terms of,
overhead.
I'm sorry, in terms of the timeline, as a detective, when the spring comes, it's gonna heat up again. So in terms of a timeline, can we try to, as we develop a subcommittee around this, can we come up with like,
A pilot of the
Yeah,
spring
right.
Yeah, yeah.
we got
like
it, I
that.
mean, it's the end of January.
comes to
April's gonna be
fast.
here quick.
Yeah.
The weather's gonna change, it's gonna heat up. So
Well, and I think in forty
Let's
something
define
days,
it.
the hours
Yeah.
change and we'll have more daylight.
this is like time sensitive.
It is.
I guess to what type of training should these folks have and everything, so, you know, there's the nonviolent training or bystander intervention, or there's, you know, there's other examples,
Conflict
but,
resolution.
de-escalation, yeah, exactly, so, you know,
What
what.
did you say, bystander?
Bystander intervention, that's one I've seen deployed in New York City and some other places, but can be risky. It's more like a domestic violence type thing, like your
Right.
neighbors are battling.
They're fighting over.
And just so everyone knows, I want, because I think Juan had mentioned, you know, even when it comes to the nonviolence outreach workers, street workers. So we train our men and women that you don't intervene, right, because of safety, right? So that's why the most important piece is building the relationships. So that if something is sparking up, I know Rob, I'm gonna make eye contact with Rob, I'm gonna go and talk to Rob and hopefully get him to walk away or pull away, you know what I mean? There's still real safety concerns, but we've seen over the years. And sometimes it's difficult because I know Juan and I have been in the position where you see a young person that you know really well, like you wanna go and physically grab them, and we have, you know, but times have changed.
Yeah.
And we have seen how people have gotten into really dangerous situations. So we don't recommend anyone jumping into a fight. I mean, the best thing you can do is call 911 or, you know, try to get other youth away from the situation. But it's definitely not a security position.
So I have one question. So presently in past tense, Lisa and Juan, you can speak to this as well. Have you guys actually, the street work has been in the neighborhoods, actually have gone to the neighborhoods, like certain hotspots, like let's just say, I'm just picking a street, Temple Street. I don't
Yes,
know what that
Alan,
is.
we do.
Okay.
We have.
So, because that's something that they do in Boston now with through the church. So every Friday, I believe it's every Friday or every other Friday, you have a congregation of volunteers, police, church folks, weather permitting, and they walk the neighborhoods. Specifically in Roxbury, that's where I'm from, and I've seen that in one of my really good friends.
So what has changed is
Yes.
our city's dynamics.
Gotcha.
People don't live in the same places anymore.
Okay.
You can rep Chad Brown, but you don't live there. The housing crisis has put people displaced,
Displaced.
families, you know, so we deal with youth that represent Minton, Harvard, Chad, East Side, South Side. Once upon a time, me and Juan were partners. We could jump in my car or his car. Well, we like mine better because I have a minivan. We would jump in the minivan.
Right.
We would jump in the minivan and just drive the neighborhoods and just go through our list. We're gonna go over to Minton, see so-and-so, we're gonna go here. There is no more of
You could
that.
speak to it, right? The trespassing orders that were put on kids in the housing projects.
A lot of work was done in
Yeah.
housing to bring that up, but I would also say to add to that, outside of housing. That dynamic is
Right.
almost, kids don't, like, there used to be so-and-so's house, we know they're gonna be out there, there's gonna be.
No more
20
on the block.
They're not
Yeah, not
doing
outside
that
no more.
like they used to,
Mhm.
so
On the
now.
internet.
Yeah,
they're-
Snapchat.
Yeah, I was just gonna
They
say,
don't-
so one of our methods
It's-
is really
it's true.
social
They don't,
media.
they don't have to be around each other like they used to, so
Mhm.
now they'll send each
Mhm.
other a message, we're gonna go over here, we're gonna do this. And then they'll go there, it's like
Right.
they're not,
Right.
they're not sitting in one spot like before.
And
Before
we
you go
learn a
there, they're
lot
at the
from
court.
social media.
Yeah.
We can tell what they're doing and who has beef with who and everything else, but always finding where to locate them and how it's, but they tell on themselves, and that's how sometimes some of the violence occurs. When there's a shooting, something happens, it's because someone is telling their location.
Right.
Mm.
And then someone goes there and
So
something
there's
happens.
I just found this out yesterday and I forgot about it. There's an organization called We Are Us, in Baltimore. And basically it's a collaboration. I don't know why I thought about it just now, but a collaboration of what we're actually talking about right
Okay.
now. And they go out in the community. So it's not a safe passage thing. It's more of a community outreach effort.
Mhm.
It was actually something I wanted to start when I was at the Institute, because I seen it happen somewhere else. And then there was other things like 300 women, 300 men
Yeah.
that started
Yeah,
here. Obviously, I don't even know that, but we see examples of things dying out,
Mhm.
right? Because of volunteerism and then also capacity and then also no funding, right? But We Are Us is, like I said, is a collective of groups, organizations, and what they do essentially to what Rob was talking about, is they go out in the community and they offer something.
Yeah.
So it's somebody from everywhere, right? From jobs programs to mental health services to human services to a nonviolence institute, or where it could be even somebody from United Way to say, hey, when we're out in the community, oh, you need a job? Yo, go talk to Alan. Alan's right over there, right? Or you need a mentor, we got somebody from Mentor, all right, and right, where at? Right here with us, walking in the streets. And so that's, I haven't looked it up myself because I just had the meeting yesterday, but I'm gonna look into it. But this could be somewhere to start to get ideas, something to be able to assemble. Because maybe that would be the way to kind of create a collective of organizations of people that are willing to go out. Now, the St. Patrick's thing might be a little different, and I just don't know what it is now because of the hours.
Yeah.
Right, so it's after school, a lot of people work, they won't be able to dedicate time for after school. But I think the upfront thing is being in the community, probably
Seen.
say after 5 o'clock, right? To where I was talking about at the rec centers, but also the hot spots, whatever those neighborhoods are, and going out there. But they also have a message that we're not gonna tolerate what you're doing. Now, we ain't gonna confront you and be combative, but we're out here also with the message that what you're doing can no longer be tolerated. But we're gonna do it with love, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna love on you. I ain't gonna challenge you in a way where you can be like, well, you gonna stop me?
Right.
Right, so.
Here's a question. How hard is it for us to have a committee meeting outside of the city hall?
Easy for me, I'm up for it.
As,
He said it, since he said it, you the chair of it, not
I'm sure if we, provided some, flowers to our kindly clerks, I'm sure we can make something happen.
Yeah, maybe we should have like a,
No, like in all seriousness, like I sit on a committee on the rec board that does, meet at different rec centers.
that's what I was saying. I was like, maybe we
It's
should have a committee
a
meeting. at the rec center,
possibility, but that's
right?
a conversation, we're gonna have with every committee member and of staff. to Make sure.
Absolutely.
Where would you see yourself, like, so the rec board meets at the rec centers, where would you wanna see this committee?
That's what I was thinking, just the rec will be an
I
easy,
think that's a
you
great.
know.
You're always welcome to
yeah,
come to
NBI, yeah,
Yeah.
NBI, right,
That's
like,
even better.
United Way,
Way.
nice,
Yeah.
spaces.
Yeah.
They might provide food,
like it's I think that's an easy way for us to kind of I don't know if it's easy actually. But, could be a way for us to get out there a little more and ease our way into it, right?
And as Juan said, I was the president of 300 Men, which was a great organization, and Diana was president of 300 Women, and we did a lot of work. But I'll tell you, the pushback that I don't know if it's pushback, but we didn't get a lot of support from the mayor's office. We didn't get a lot of support from the police. And then, I mean, we did that probably for like, what, 6 years, 7 years,
5 years.
easy, right? And Juan, you were one of the members, so right? You're one of the key members. So that's why I say this has to be something where it has to go, state, city, everyone has to buy in, because if not, you're gonna continue to have these problems, and they're only going to get worse.
Right.
It's not gonna get better, right? We've seen it hasn't gotten better, right? The violence, it hasn't gotten better, it's only gotten worse.
And to be
So-
honest, I think under this administration, it's only going to
It's
get
only going-
worse,
thank you.
especially
Yes.
if our
Great point.
community starts to lose resources
Yes.
and things are gonna get worse for us.
Correct.
God forbid, but.
Yes.
So that's the good thing about this group, Alan, is like, we've been, having good conversations, but like representation, like
Mhm.
whether, folks have buy-in, like folks are aware, like we have people from state departments, from nonprofit world, obviously from the mayors, the city council, like we have a good group of folks here, that at the very least, we're all aware, so
Yeah.
Mhm.
trying to get buy-in is the next part.
Yes,
This is a public health and safety issue, right? We all
Mhm.
agree on
Yes.
that.
yes.
Yes.
So when we talk about health, maybe we should look outside of just law enforcement stuff, what we're doing in community-based organizations. Maybe we should look at, state health department.
I just had a
What's the
meeting with
funding
Department of
sources?
Health this morning.
Yeah,
And they
and
do
Brown.
have some funding streams.
Mm.
We actually just,
Right. In Brown University Health, I just got appointed to this. Don't ask me to tell you what the name of this thing is. It's something, but its focus is PPSD.
Mm.
Uh,
What's the name?
I'm trying to- It's, and yeah, it's focusing on improving PPSD student outcomes.
Mm.
And it's a heavy board, heavy committee. The CAO of PPSD is on it. And a ton of heavy hitters from Brown. I want, the next meeting, I'm gonna bring this to that committee. And see what resources they can provide. Also, because they are talking about funds for PPSD out of Brown University. So I
so
think
that'd be
that this
perfect
fits right
handle.
into the
Yeah.
whole piece of what they're trying to do.
And I think what you're saying gets to sort of the next step is we identify with youth who need services, and then where do you refer them to? And then, yeah, then you get into the behavioral health money, right? So BH, DDH, and they have the certified community behavioral health centers, and we have some of that where they have a lot of resources from the SAMHSA grants. Because now we get to why are you acting out? Why are you in trouble? Is there something going on at home? Do you have PTSD? Do you need more services? That sort of stuff. But that's the next thing, once we, that's how do we build out this program?
Perfect. Because, right, understanding what this new administration is and where they're at, obviously seeing what happened last night and what happened today, I got the feeling this is gonna be a trend, right?
Mhm.
We're gonna, no, we're pulling that back. You know what? We're not gonna pull that back, right? To kind of cause panic. And so thinking about funding and where funding comes from is exclusively for CVI, right? Now we're talking about the philanthropic community and what that looks like and what they can do to support. They can never fulfill what government fulfills in terms of funding, but they can play a role in it. And so I reached out to some philanthropy organizations, and I think there's in terms of what we've been talking about nationally, how do we have to change the narrative. We have to have new language for this administration. And so the guy I was talking to, which comes from CBI, he did street outreach. But now he's in philanthropy, and he was just like, well, to philanthropy, when you come with these problems, like we're talking about today, they're gonna be like, tell us more, right? So like the data in CVI, when we talk about high-risk individuals, 0.5% of the population drives 75% of the violence in urban communities. If you say that to somebody in philanthropy, they're like, well, that's a very small number in terms of the world problems.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you want me to give you 2 million to work on 0.5% of a population of the community? Sucks, yeah, they're killing each other, but in terms of everything that's happening in the world, I can't give 2 million to that.
Mhm.
And so as I'm sitting there, I'm talking with him, and we was just throwing out ideas. And Robbie, you brought it up, sort of, and so I was like, what about a community healing strategy? Right, and it leads to what you're talking about, Mike, right? Like dealing with all of the things that we know that causes violence, right? And so there would be buckets. And so we're just talking, right? So you have violence prevention and intervention, you have trauma-informed healing, you have community empowerment and capacity building, restorative justice, conflict resolution, sustainable policy and systematic change. Right, and then all of these things have bullet points, which I have laid out and I can share with this group. And violence intervention and prevention is part of it, right? So it will get funding, but all of these other things will get funding as well. I think what's been happening along with CVI, one, nationally, there hasn't been a recognized definition. CDC has its own definition, right? Folks in the field have their own definition. Us at Giffords, our CVI team, we have a different definition. So when you go into funding, especially in this administration, you're saying, they ask you what CVI is, and you got 7 people in there with a different message. We can't fund that. We just don't know what it is. And you call it a profession, right? Which I believe it is, but he just like give me a different insight on it. I'm like, you're right. Like if you was to come to me and I got $2 million, I'm not gonna give it to, I can give it to all of this. If you're gonna do all of these things, because now you're gonna come out with outcomes. Right? There's gonna be outcomes attached to this. Now I can see the return on investment in my dollars. CVI, the outcome and the return on investments is maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, which I think is a worthy investment, but I get from somebody that's giving money, it's not a worthy investment for them. And so it's one is thinking about this in a new way in terms of CVI and the partnerships, right? And this leads into the partnerships and thinking about the partnerships that people haven't established yet when it comes to CVI work. right? And then it's also bringing the people together at the table that don't get along. They have to be at the table, right? There has to be a conversation to say, but I think they come to the table if you have a strategy and they include it in the strategy, in bringing those folks together, because it's just, again, like you said, diversity, equity, inclusion is no longer a term that could be used in this, and things like that. And so that's been the national conversation that we've been having, in trying to talk to philanthropy and what the role is that they can play, as a subsidiary to, and which there is money out there. But if we look at Rhode Island as a state, it's not an economic center, right?
Right.
There's not a lot of philanthropy. I mean, there's money out there. We know there's rich people in Rhode Island. But we got one foundation and everybody goes after the Rhode Island Foundation for money. But I think if there's a consensus on strategy, I think, and community healing strategy, it was just, that's in quotations, that had to be the name, was just an example. But if that was laid out to them to say, hey, all of this is inclusive of the community and CVI is just a part of that, right? I think we'll be able to get more in depth into, or be able to get funding that way. Because in this will include law enforcement, right? Right, you got your family services of the world and things like that. So it'll include all these entities in this strategy. Obviously, you need a project manager for this because you need somebody to make sure that people are held accountable to it, but that's put in the budget of the funding and things like that, so. But I'll share that, who should I share that with?
You can share the clerks and they can disperse.
Tyler, hi.
Hi.
I'm sitting there, I'm looking at you, and I'm like, that's her.
Public Education Advisory Committee. That's what it
That's
is.
what's called,
That's
that's
what
the
it
name
is.
of it.
Yeah, I remember it.
Yeah, that's it.
Can I ask you next week too?
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Is, my daughter's in Charlotte, North Carolina, and she sent me this. This thing that she's working on with the Urban League, that the Urban League's involved in, and it's called Alternatives to Violence, ATV. And one of the things that struck me and why I brought the health thing up was. There's a model that they use that's based on an epidemiologist research into violence trends. So they're spinning this into the health field in terms of trauma, generational trauma and how that impacts.
Cause
how
do you know,
folks-
cause so, Dr. Gary Sluckin, who was kind of one of the first, he's an
Yeah.
epidemiologist. And he's been said violence was a public health issue.
Absolutely.
Right, and he created the organization Cure Violence, which is still a.
That's what this is.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
the model.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, yeah.
That's the same, yeah, pure violence. That's
But
what
I think that's gonna
She's at
change.
the conference,
I think
right?
Trump is gonna remove that
Yeah.
tag off of,
Yeah.
off of gun violence and say it's not a public health.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
So I think we're at next steps, tax assignments, deadlines.
Say this.
I think we need folks to step up and be part of that. Whether it's a formal or non-formal subcommittee, I don't know who has some capacity, some time.
Does that bring?
Well, I don't think anyone has time, but
The subcommittee question brings up open meetings compliance and everything else too, or how does that all?
Oh, yeah,
like, I
could
know
we
with
be
some things
outside?
like would have to have agendas posted. and-
I just want like a general interest of like folks and then we can kind of go through the.
Bit more official
the
after,
formal
right?
stuff, yeah.
Yeah. I'm all right.
You know, it seems like that's awesome, man. We have options, and, you know, folks can't make it, you know, like, we don't need the whole group, 'cause that's kind of what this is.
Right.
We really need
Oh,
folks.
so, yeah,
But
Hand down.
could we pull, community
I love you, honestly.
stakeholders, individuals into the subcommittee to help us do the work?
What's funny at that point is if you wanted the family service, tides, the other organizations that are doing like particularly youth, working with youth, is that, you know, when it comes to structuring it out and implementation, because that buy-in you want from everybody. We would like the colonel to a point, you know, make sure the colonel's on board and all that.
But I'm even thinking of.
community
OGs.
members, yeah,
Yeah, the
Yeah.
people that we
I'm
would
thinking of
then
the OGs.
activate with us.
yeah.
It's an easy
that have
first
gone
step.
through it, Turned their life around,
Yeah.
and now they're looking to give something back.
Yeah, so
And
that,
put them on
whatever,
a subcommittee to do
well,
something.
boards do it, right? Boards
Yeah.
have subcommittees of
Exactly.
people that are not.
Not on the
That's where I'm going.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that idea.
We're pretty flexible around here. As long as we're not.
I don't know,
breaking-
you talking about
No,
compliance or something.
No,
it has to be.
Someone gotta bring up the point,
But that's
yeah.
real, that's real, that's real.
I deal with it all the time.
Maybe they come in as from a volunteer perspective.
That's it.
Or just like a guest
Yeah,
speaker, you know
or
what I'm
guest
saying?
speaker,
Like, it's- yeah, we're.
Yeah, you call it like a workshop or
Right,
something.
right.
You're not voting on, you don't have any money,
Right.
you're just having.
Exactly.
So it's, and then this committee then does that, right? They bring it to this committee and then it's part of the public and the open.
Yeah,
look
Miguel
at
and
the part
Doug
of
can
that.
definitely help steer that process, whatever it looks like. Right? Right, Doug?
Absolutely.
So one thing that I'll do for, as far as next steps, we have the volunteer application. I think next we need like some type of timeline. And obviously my timeline will be perfect, but just when we want to shoot for first subcommittee meeting, when we think we can have volunteers recruited or when we can announce it and when we can hit the ground for the first time, a rough timeline, then we can work from it.
Mhm.
And I can, I just need reminders, but I can share information in terms of what's happening on federal levels and stuff like that. And then
Yeah.
also, any examples of like funding, potential funding opportunities, like AB 28, the gun ammo tax and things like that. And even if it's not something that's a possibility here, at least people have the little.
Aware, yeah.
and they know what it looks like.
No, yeah, it's a good reminder for legislation and events, and I know we represent a lot of different orgs here. Like if your org is having an event, a fundraiser, whatever you think might be helpful for the group to be aware, definitely get it over to our staff or to the clerks and they can disperse to the rest of the committee. I think it's important that, we obviously work together in this specific work, but just generally support each other as a broader community as much as possible.
And I also serve on the board, Diana and I too, on the Rhode Island Coalition Against Gun Violence too. So.
Does anyone else have any tasks, assignment, deadlines that they wanna chat about? I don't have anything on my end. Nope. So the next meeting,
I might pull that calendar up.
so it seems like Wednesdays at 1 PM fairly work well for most folks. So I would say probably the 26th at this point, 19 is probably a little too soon.
February 26th?
Yeah, is that an option?
Open.
I love how flexible you guys are. How's it feeling for the rest of the committee?
Yeah, I'm open.
Yeah,
1 PM, right? I'm open.
1 PM?
Yeah.
Awesome. So we can plan on that. Then, if no one else has anything they want to share, we're gonna open up to public comment if anyone from.
February 12th.
has something to share.
February 12th at 8:30. Let me just double check the time in the morning. The Governor's Workforce Board's Adult Career Pathways Advisory Committee will be all about justice involved individuals. So if you guys want to join and have any comments or, would love to have you there.
Can you say that again, the date?
February 12th at 8:30.
That's an in-person event.
In person at the Department of Labor and Training, first floor, right in the conference room right there.
You get all that to me so I can give it to the Juvenile Justice and
Absolutely.
Delinquency Prevention Advisory Committee,
Yeah.
whatever it is, state advisory, listen, I know all the titles, so yeah. I need to send it over.
So we have to send that out to everyone?
Yeah, I can give that out to everybody, yeah.
Yes, please, cause
Thank you.
I'm gonna forget it.
Yeah, cause the courts, you have the courts involved at all or anything like that, or?
So no, the DOC is giving a presentation. We're gonna do I'm gonna give like 2 slides on just the difference from intervention, prevention and reentry work. Jess from our office is gonna explain what we already fund. And then we're gonna do a Q&A to ask folks what organization would you call if you have a justice involved individual you just employed and you have a challenge, right? So really we're just trying to the committee hasn't been used in a way that I would say is really advisory. And so we're trying to make, this committee that has a bunch of CEOs and, heads of CBOs at the table, actually inform some of the spending at our board. And so this is my first time being able to run the committee. And so I hope that we're gonna have a good outcome and be able to move more in that direction of, actually advising how our funds are being spent. So it'll be helpful to have support in the room. So, folks can say like, this money needs to be allocated here, this work needs to be done. And our staff are gonna be watching, our board members are gonna be watching. So I'm hoping it'll be a catalyst of, pushing this work even more at the department. I'm also gonna be setting up a meeting with you, Mike, and the director. But yeah, so it'd be really, really helpful. I'll send that information to y'all.
So I just have one last question. So for clarity, in regards to the subcommittee being formed, are we waiting until February 26th, or are we going to start working?
I think we should, I think my staff should work with the clerk's office to see, what, if any, like compliance needs to be followed, or what their best guidance is in terms of what that might look like.
Like Rob said, April's going to be.
Yeah, no,
we can get
Like,
started.
I don't wanna throw dates out there, but I think, anywhere between like March 15th and April 15th should be the goal of having something ready for.
Or it's not a subcommittee of this.
Oh, right. I mean, whatever it takes.
Sounds like everybody wanted to do it. I was just like,
Yeah.
so if there's the
Things that
bones
can
are there
happen,
and there's
yeah.
something for us to vote on and move
Correct, yeah, that
forward,
works
then
as well. Yeah.
you can come back in a couple
Whatever
of weeks.
seamless, I think. Whatever seamless, more seamless.
Yeah.
About 1 second. The only thing I also want to share is, my colleague, Councilwoman, Shelley Peterson started, it's like a little program event where a bunch of, elected officials across the city of Providence go to, a different rec center every month and play the kids of that rec center in a basketball game. We're not very good, but it's a lot of fun. The high schoolers are definitely, whooping us. But we do have a game this Friday at Sackett Rec Center at 7 p.m. if anyone wants to.
Friday?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's a fun community event.
Friday at 7.
Yeah.
Who's your director?
Sherrod.
Need Ben Wallace.
Pastor Sherrod? Pastor Sherrod? Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
I know that we were working with planning to map the resources for CBI and the city. Is there an update on that?
Yeah.
Or no?
I'm actually in the process of doing some CBI research myself as part of my MSW. That is on my list of things I'd like to do, is kind of get a GIS map going.
Thank you.
Awesome.
I think PJ was working on something at the state level. He said, I remember something about like a survey going out.
Yeah,
He was attempting, I don't know where he's at with that, but.
he said it should
was.
be out the end of this month.
Yeah.
CBI
Well, probably at the end of this month.
mapping meeting.
Because there's not much in Rhode Island. There's not much in Providence. It's
It's not.
the Nonviolence Institute.
Yeah, it was just all the justice involved programs, where they
Okay.
are, what their scope is, and then being able
I
to evaluate where the gaps are. Right, and how they can connect for the mapping exercise. PJ's survey was like a survey to businesses, to community, and CBOs and state agencies, I think.
Okay.
Someone from, Val, you had something you wanted to share?
Yeah. I had a lot of trouble keeping my mouth shut today because a week ago, RIPTA started a new bus service for 5 of our high schools. And I got emails about that. Well, I'm in transportation advocacy. I got emails about this. Saw it on Slack. I heard about it in person. I saw it on the news. And I haven't heard it discussed today. 5 of our high schools have dedicated RIPTA buses at the moment to take students right back to their neighborhoods and not through KP.
Wow.
Oh,
Wow.
And nobody here has talked about it today.
I wasn't aware.
I was aware either, yeah.
Because Chair Sanchez, to your point, when you established your committee, sometimes in Providence, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Sometimes.
so somehow, the
Mm-hmm.
new CEO of REPTA, Chris Duran, felt that he heard the complaints that we're hearing, maybe through Providence Police Department, I don't know. And he chose to respond to it right away. And because we have new drivers, there's been new funding, thanks to some of the advocacy groups that worked on RIPTA funding. There were drivers available, they could establish routes and assign a couple of buses, and things could happen. And kids are apparently already being transported not through KP. Some kids are still going through KP electively because you can't stop them from doing it,
Yeah.
okay?
That one.
But apparently it already started a week ago. I looked at the Instagram page for ripped up while you guys were meeting. I'm not like
And
making.
the high schools are listed.
Do we know who they are, the five schools?
Pardon me?
Do we know who the five schools are?
Hope High is one of them because I looked at that because that's my neighborhood.
I would be really curious to know how that works, because not everybody lives in the same neighborhood.
I'm gonna assume, when I went to Mount Pleasant as a kid, we had the Potters Ave bus, we called it, which went from the Potters area to Mount Pleasant
And Hope High,
directly.
when I
So
was at
just
Hope, it had a
skip
Broad Street
KP.
bus. The
So
kids that were like
I'm
on the south side.
assuming it's something similar,
Got it.
like you're targeting a specific.
That has like.
West
cross
End.
streets.
Yeah,
I mean, I like the idea.
Board members sitting there, I'm like, the heck?
Yeah, it's the kids that we know that are
One word
in trouble,
about it.
kids that get on that bus.
I definitely
Yes, and
enjoyed
I'll
it because
show
it
you
kept me
that
from
when you
having to
guys
go to
worry
Kennedy
about
Plaza
the
unless I missed my bus.
Well, I
But
went to Kennedy Plaza
mentorship is
electively
important.
'cause, you know,
Mentorship.
When
is
I wanted
to.
important.
I
Plus,
wanted
it's
to.
important.
Sorry,
I'm
yes.
not discounting any of the mentorship effort that ongoingly will be important across our city. No question about that. But this transportation issue, we have an ally we didn't even talk to. But, okay, so the other two quick hits. I heard something about funding CVI. I'm excited about it. Diana and I spent time in Chicago 2 years ago, talking to every town about this topic and going to listen at seminars where people were discussing CVI and how they got funded. And I heard research for CVI mentioned here. And it comes to my mind that Brown University has stated that regardless of federal funding, they are going to continue their health initiatives, including ending gun violence, I'm sure, because Brown Institute of Public Health is part of that university and funding will continue into that kind of research. So maybe that partner called Brown Institute of Public Health is a partner that we should continue to try to work with because their funding may not be cut off just because of what's happening federally. The other thing I heard about funding that I was thinking about is every county organization itself. And I'm looking at Lisa because even though Moms Demand Action is sitting here, you're our Rhode Island partner. You are our community violence interruption partner. So it's your connection to every town where you can ask for research to be conducted in Rhode Island, where you can ask for additional funding for our initiatives here and make those grant applications. Our group can support the grant application process here in Rhode Island. Our volunteers are trained and ready to help, but it's our community partner that has to initiate. As Diana and I found out in Chicago, our community partner has to initiate the applications for that.
So I've been working on something similar with Jean, actually. As far as the
Safer
grant process,
communities?
correct.
Okay,
So, that was my thoughts, in order to collaborate with the Pathway to End Gun Violence with safer communities under the moms to, get grants from every town, so,
and you're one of our community partners.
correct,
So we have two community partners of our group at the table.
Right.
Who are authorized to work with every town.
correct.
We couldn't, all set. Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public? Anything you wanna share, get off their chest? Oh, Lisa has something there.
I just wanted to add, because I was going to reach out to Moms Demand, I'm still gonna reach out to you personally, but I also want to invite everyone else. So I'm part of a committee losing the VOCA cuts that occurred. A lot of our nonprofits that work with victims of violence have not received funding. They've lost funding cuts. So should put my glasses on.
February 6th.
Tell you guys.
February 6th.
February 6th.
At the State House Library.
Yes,
Mhm.
at 3:30. Are you told to be at 3:30? I'm told to be there at 3:30.
I'll be there at
3:30.
3 because I'm part of the.
Oh, that's right.
partnership
I'll be there
with
at 3 as
General
well. So I just wanted to ask if, you know, you have free time to come and represent. Specifically, my ask is if you lost someone that you love to violence, if you have experienced victimization, been a victim of violence, please come because we are gonna ask those that are sitting there to either raise their hand or stand up if they feel comfortable, because we need people to know that it's not just our Black and brown community, it's all of us that have experienced some type of victimization of violence or lost a loved one to violence. And this funding is extremely, extremely important to us. So if you have some time and you can be there, please do.
Where's this phone?
So it's at the Victim Bill State House event. And it's in the library, in the State House.
That would direct $30 million of state funding to my office to implement any support victims of
Of violence.
crime, all crime, across the board. We faced significant cuts, but the most we had federally was like $11 million. It would transform victim services in the state. It would be transformative amount of funding for, from that Woonsocket to Westerly to Warren. It would mean for everybody. So
Yeah.
it's a really big deal.
Folks all set?
I was gonna say, the public comment points makes me think that we should start thinking about having some agencies come and present to us. And maybe we can start doing those asks now for the future meetings, to just have them come and tell us, what are you doing? What do you have available? How can we better work with you? Because, then we can learn the 5 things that they're doing at RIPTA. We can have a good discussion about it. And I'm sure every agency has something that should be related to this work, that we can try to connect to them.
And even in terms of like just time also, Corey, I don't know if it might make sense maybe just to like send like a general letter to a lot of these folks
Yeah.
to see provide, because we're meeting once a month and we have already a lot to discuss. Like by the time we get through all the state agencies, probably be a couple of years.
Right. Yeah.
But I think it's a good idea. Are we all set? That's it. I give you guys 3 chances, so if you don't have anything at this point, I just want to talk. Can I entertain a motion to adjourn? Thank you so much, guys, for.
Motion
coming
to
out.
adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
That's great.
It's
gonna be.
Wow, we should cut.
401.
Oh, yes, yes. I got that, information. to the-
419.